Welcome back, and thanks for hanging in there with us. I hope your break was quick but good. Our next session, How CBAM is Driving Regulations and Blurring Industry Boundaries, is being presented by Anirban, also known as Andy Bhattacharyya. So we're really excited to have Andy come on and be a part of this next discussion with us. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Venetia. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to get started. So good day wherever you are, afternoon, morning. So today I'm going to talk about an interesting topic. It's a carbon border adjustment mechanism. It has various parts. It has a regulation part. It has a carbon accounting part. It has aftermarket part, business integration between cross countries, continent part. It has a lot of business transformation part, for the lack of better words. So what I would like to also inform all of you, please feel free to pose questions, and I'm going to try to pick up, and the team will also help me out here if I'm not picking up any question. Make it interactive, doesn't need to wait till the end, and we take it from there. So let me first let me go to the next slide. Is that the title of the session, and I think we'll start with the poll. So why don't we pop the poll up, and then I'm going to take that as a response, and I will transition to my speech. Good. I think there are responses which are, I'm seeing yes. That's great. So you're already in the bed of the topic, which is great. So this gives me a good understanding of the maturity of the audience, which is fantastic. Very good. If everybody, I see there are 71 attendees, so we can, we have around maybe 8-9 more responses coming in. If not, I think I'm good. I'm so glad that that there is some knowledge base, and even if it's not there, I basically plan to explain. So yeah, we can turn off the poll. Thank you so much. And I'll go to the first slide of the session. Well, I don't know it's very readable or not. When I was putting the circle together, I don't know if I did justice to this, but I'm going to explain to the slide where my head was. So, so look, of course, let's divide this takeaways of the slide into 3 sections. One is overall, there is climate technology. We are very much aware of climate technology. We are really embracing in the value chain, supply chain, the elements of data, elements of AI, digital, business process enhancement, change management. But this whole cross-border adjustment mechanism, I wouldn't say it's new for the Europe, but it's a little new for some other parts of the world, right? It's about how do I really make sure we have a good way of carbon emission reduction realization during the export and during the import. Hypothetically, that's the definition of CBAM. Now, how does it affect your cross-border supply chain? Of course, supply chain is not only waiting on CBAM, right? There are other elements of CBAM as well, and the supply chain as well. And the second part is that to enable CBAM, which is a part of the larger supply chain, you have an option, not an option, maybe it's this, no other option maybe, is to enable the climate technology piece. And that's where the circle comes in. If you really see, there are, I don't know if it's readable or not, it's like the one is basically where you're doing assessments and you're really understanding where your business stands. The second element to this is I'm going to see that if I quickly, just give me 1 second. I'm going to I'm going to go back and quickly read this out. I have some notes out here. And so the first one is basically your preparedness. So key SOPs, progress, maturity assessment. The second is the overall materiality assessment. Sometimes we also do double materiality. The next is your climate risk. The next one is your supply chain circularity, life cycle analysis, where your CBAM will be in place. And then goals, objectives, actual versus planned is a number 5, which is basically not only your science-based targets, but also as you being the leader, how you are measured against the sustainability transformation, what kind of key results achieved, objectives you have. The 6th one is your carbon accounting, which is an essential part of CBAM. And the 7th one is around, I would say, governance, upskilling, reporting. And the last one is your assurance. So if you really see this 8 circular elements of sustainability and ESG value chain, actually CBAM can be placed in any of these 8. So preparedness, strategy and materiality, climate risk, supply chain, goals and objectives, carbon accounting, upskilling, governance, reskilling, reporting, and assurance. So that being said, if I go to the next slide, and please feel free to ask any questions, make it interactive. If I go to the next slide, we'll talk about the key components of CBAM. So what makes CBAM a very essential part of the value chain, supply chain? So we'll talk about that. So the first thing that we'll talk about is, of course, regulatory needs. It's ideally defining the uniform standards. It's defining how you would be reducing your carbon footprint and your carbon reduction, and what kind of incentivizing procedures we can apply. So when you import, okay, your taxes will get reduced when you're importing something if there is a better footprint, carbon footprint, right? Exactly. Let's say when it was manufactured, what was the carbon emission? When it was transported, what was the carbon emission? When it's coming to the border, how it will, if those reports are available, and based on that, you have tax implications. So there is a really an element of regulatory needs in the overall value chain. Blurring the boundaries, that's a very important concept about how do you do cross-sector collaboration, integrated supply chain, how all these elements of, how these all elements come together. And the third piece is your carbon marketplace. Because when you're playing in the carbon market, suppose hypothesis, you have an oil and gas company emitting carbon, working with a green car manufacturing company, how do you offset the carbon? That's a lot of regulations play around. I think there's a question out here. Are you aware of any CBAM assessment of the United Nations systems operations assisted to humanitarian relief, emergencies, technical operations, among others? There are a few templates. It's, as you know, it's a framework. Short answer is yes. We can connect. I have all details with IIA. We can connect on this. Short answer is yes, there are. And if time permits, I will cover a little bit. So let's spend some time on this around the 3 things, how it affects your internal organizational readiness, which organizations are really playing these roles, who will be, which roles are becoming more critical from a line of business perspective, integration perspective. The first one, nothing new in any business, is the compliance regulations department. They are handling multiple things. Now they're also putting together a complete tax program around when products are going out and products are coming in. So there is a very prominent responsibility, which actually can be dealt very smartly with some frameworks, as Jose asked, right? So like, it's something that we can do that. The second piece of the blurring the boundaries, also there's a lot of responsibilities coming around the procurement group, supply chain group, innovation group, because every country's needs, UN SDGs are all different. All the 192 countries, as you know, though there are 17 goals aligned, but some countries will do better than the others, of course, because of various reasons, infrastructures, everything. So how do you make sure that you really apply a common sense when we are blurring the boundaries to do integrated supply chain? You as your own organization, you have an operations in the US, you have an operations in Europe, you have an operations in Latin America. How do you handle that? There are some best practices out there. I will give an example. For example, when a product is getting decommissioned in the US versus is getting decommissioned in the Europe, right? Of course, there's an asset management, lifecycle management data we have to gather. Now, there are certain countries which are ready to take the second life of the product. When you ship that product, what kind of taxations will happen? What is the guarantee? What is the, not guarantee, but what is the proposed emission that would happen if I'm a country one, I'm a country two, and I'm shipping a product from country one to country two for the second life of the, let's say, a battery, right? Today it was used for automotive, tomorrow it will be used for something else. What kind of taxation you would put into that? Versus a new product coming in, you put a taxation. Various rules and regulations will follow, right? So one of the elements which we're seeing in the supply chain is if you can dismantle the product, there is a less of a taxation if you cannot dismantle the product. So there comes your right to repair, right to report, credibility, relationship, contract, where a manufacturer may not be able to open up the secret sauce when they're shipping to another organization, or even a supplier and an OEM, original equipment manufacturing organizations, to do cross-border transactions. So if the product is dismantled, it's easier to understand the life, the dismantling landfill regulations. If the product cannot be dismantled, what kind of taxations will happen? A lot of nuances are there when we are saying blurring the boundaries. The third topic is about carbon marketplace. It's about when you're doing a carbon offsetting. Marketplace is a broad term, right? It's not that advanced in the marketplace because people are doing transactions, carbon being traded, right? So how can you make sure that this whole CBAM from your organization really gives a good report to the desk of CFO, making sure that, look, while we are bringing this in, sending this out, this much carbon equivalent has been emitted, and this has been reduced. So that kind of accounting we need to do. Nothing new in the carbon accounting space, but carbon accounting is completely related to this whole concept of CBAM and the marketplace. And of course, at the end of the day, what's happening here is that we are also driving a net zero strategy. So if you really see these three things, it's driving a net zero strategy. So what is net zero? As we all know, I have a goal, 2035, 2040, 2030. Are we marching forward to this or not? And CBAM is playing a critical role in that. Feel free to ask any questions. Steps to achieve CBAM. I mentioned a little bit, I'll go a little deep on this. Then what are the implementation components of these? Let's run a poll one more time. Love to get a perspective around the audience, how they're in this poll. So let's launch that poll. Very good. So, okay. Okay, some more responses. Okay, great. Okay. So more than 50% of the team here is saying is the lack of knowledge. Basically, yes, I may be in a role of carbon abatement, but I don't know the exact policy, exact framework. I think, again, coming back to the framework, right? So yes, there are, okay, why don't we finish the poll first, and maybe 5 more seconds. We're seeing some, yeah, we're seeing some more responses coming in. 50, I think we are good for now. So I think I have an idea. I think that's, and you can choose more than one options if you want to. Okay. Maybe 5 more seconds, 10 more seconds. Okay, great. So we can, I'm okay with the result for now. So I'm going to cross this and I will get going. It's changing a little bit. I'm okay. It's like, I was good, very good. So I think mainly the lack of knowledge and understanding of what needs to be done. So let's do, let's hone into that a little bit. And please feel free to post any questions. So I'd love to make this, again, more interactive. So think about understanding the whole risk matrix. What does it mean? I'll give an example of climate risk. So absolutely. Okay. Can you explain the key components? I was explaining a little bit in the previous slide and how it aims to reduce the carbon leakage. Absolutely. So if you really see, there are various components. I will pick this question up and then we'll come back to the slide. So there are, first of all, what's the definition of CBAM? Let's talk about that. It's emissions, as you know, weight of the goods that being transferred, shipped across the border into the emission factor, which we generally pick up from EPA. That's how we do, right? So for but there are various levels of CBAM interaction, right? There are various levels. First of all, when a product is not used, when the product is manufactured, when the product is in use, a product is refurbished, and the product is renewed, right? So various ways of life cycle of the product is generally you'll see, right? So the mechanism that comes in the CBAM and any Green Deal, like you'll know all these financial companies who are giving loans and green loans, right, to the energy companies to put a windmill, from that to an example of like getting into a cross-border transactions, anything, right? The ultimate goal is to reduce the carbon emission. That's the first goal. So now, how do we make sure that there is a good understanding of the how part, right? It's like, how do you make sure that anything that you're manufacturing, so manufacturing is your scope 1, right? Let's talk about the 3 concepts of scope 1, scope 2, and the scope 3. Let's spend some time on that. So when we are, there's one more question, how does CBAM affect the pricing of the carbon credits? Does it have a direct effect, or does it just play a part of a larger mechanism? And I don't want to lose this question. So let me, hopefully the questions are staying back. There was a question previously. So I will answer the previous question. I'll come back to this, right? So the core component of CBAM, honestly, is sitting at the core of carbon accounting. Anything that from a product carbon footprint, we call PCF, from your own manufacturing, from a vendor's manufacturing data, you're procuring it. So, and then you're also taking it to a distributor, putting it to the shelves or in a dealer, or it's a B2B environment. The bottom line is to manage scope 1, which is burn, scope 2, which is buy, whatever you're buying, and scope 3, which is beyond, which you're not exactly responsible for, but you're buying, but you're actually, even beyond buying, for example, your supplier is manufacturing something for you, which you will use this as an ingredient or a raw material. Then you have to go back to the customer, to the supplier, and say, look, I need to know the life cycle of this raw material. When you manufactured, when you transported, in use in my manufacturing floor, and end of life of your raw material. So you as a buyer have the full right to ask for that. So now CBAM's first step is to kind of do the greenhouse gas emission analysis from an overall suppliers, OEM, distributor, retailer perspective. You see the any value chain, any manufacturing value chain. So if you are doing that job correctly, your CBAM taxation negotiations, imports, exports become a very focused part of the conversation, because now you have an idea of what your supplier has done in China, bringing that to something in the US, right? Do we have that data? Even do you have a contract in place to even get that data from China? That's another conversation. So all these enablements needs to happen, because maybe as of today, you never asked for this data. Now because you do not have a contract with your supplier to ask to get that data to you. So you need to renegotiate that contract and tell them, look, at the end of the day, I need this data going forward from July 1st. So that's the renegotiation of the contract, what data they will be sharing about their product. And even if you take your product, which is in the field, you circle back that product back for refurbishment, that data also are needed. First is, how do you collect the data? Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. Scope 2 is difficult, as we all know. Number 2, the enablement of CBAM is very essential to know that where are my cross borders? Am I doing a purposeful milk run? That's a term we use in supply chain. That I'm going to design the product in the US, manufacture in Mexico, bring it back in the US. I'm just giving an example. So how the NAFTA policies will work out, how the cross border will work out. That's where you have to have a good smartness understanding on the cross border supply chain. When you are ready to do this and you're basically shipping it between, let's say, within the European region, European countries, right? We are shipping this multiple cross borders, almost 29, 30 countries out there, right? So all these are still applicable, right? Which kind of design is a country of origin, country of development, country of deployment, country of use, country of decommission, wherever you're landfilling it, because you have very much accessible for the 29, 30 countries in the European nation, right? So all these need to be built in your supply chain, need your bill of materials, need to build in your invoicing strategy. All these things have to be built in it. So ultimately, to enable CBAM, you need to make sure that you have that value chain built in. And that's where I'm going to go a little bit more deeper on the transparency part of it. But let me take this question first. How does CBAM affect pricing of carbon credits? Does it have a direct effect, or does it just play a part in a larger mechanism to affect the pricing of those credits? There are a couple of opinions on the table on this, right? So my opinion is that the two aspects of it. One is the regulations aspect of it, what you're doing from a CBAM perspective. And the second is how it is affecting, if you are really encouraging lesser carbon leakage. That's the main purpose of CBAM, right? You're basically controlling the carbon leakage. That's the main purpose. Once you do that, your value for your net zero carbon, right? Like what you have to do the offsetting part, you will have a better negotiation power, right? So if I'm just a manufacturer and I'm just emitting carbon, right? And I'm not falling in the right negotiations on CBAM, I think it's kind of mandated in the Europe. It's getting mandated in the Europe for the CBAM. So you have to do it. Suppose hypothesis, if somebody doesn't do it, then their carbon market, their carbon value will, like purchasing that carbon, would be much more costlier than somebody who is doing CBAM, right? So that's where I feel like that's what it is. Can you please name some specific challenges companies run into the CBAM introduction and implementation? What is the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is more than taxation and rules, which the desk of CFO and can build it. The biggest challenge is data and how you collect the data. Because a supplier can give you a report and they can get rid of the taxation based on what it is. So how do you validate that data? That becomes very essential. To what extent are stakeholders aware of the proposed change? I would say because I do business in Europe, so I know, I would say, let me throw a percentage to it. I would say 50%, that's a number. So what channels have been utilized to provide information about the change? It's mainly the regulatory compliance, right? Especially if you're doing business in Europe, you ought to follow their compliance, their framework. Somebody asked about the UN SDG framework, right? I would love to respond back in some forum that I can put that framework name. What channels been? What are the emotional responses of the stakeholders to the change initiative? Fantastic question. So I feel like there's two school of thoughts on CBAM, right? First of all, I mean, if there's a good reason to do this, right? First of all, you have to determine the emissions. You have to understand the purchase certificates program. You have to understand what's your deadline on this next year, the year after, because it's getting full effect in 2026. I think we're the transition phase has started from October 1st, 2023, but I think the full-fledged implementation would be done by January 2026. That's kind of the timeline. So I think that there's a lot of like emotions are going on in the organization, but right now it's a little cost-heavy agenda. So, but I feel like if the procurement team, supply chain team, and of course the CFO team are making the right choices based on what your value chain looks like, then I feel like this will be settling down in a year, because there's a lot of questions being asked that, okay, can we be picky on doing these cross-border transactions that will go to the report, ultimately the CFO reports, right? So I would feel that the emotional responses, I love this question, what are the emotional responses? I feel like there is a little bit of a struggle because there's a lack of knowledge, as we saw in the poll. It's like also the timeline, because now you're developing something, you do not have a PCF done, product carbon footprint done, but now you know that you have to change your manufacturing to satisfy an organization in Europe to do the CBAM for the imports, right? You have to make those changes now, right? How do you make this more global? It's about keeping that deadline in mind. When I say deadline in mind, January 2026, backward schedule your plan, your transformation plan, and embed the carbon accounting, ideally scope 1, 2, and 3 in your bag. And once you do that, the remaining regulations follow-up will come from the CFO office anyway, right? And the biggest bang for the buck would be transparency. How much transparent you can be. Sometimes look into a concept called Catena X. It's happening in Europe as we speak. Most of the automotive industry is doing it. So a big push by Catena X to read and write data. That also opens up the economy. So it also depends on how much the economy wants to open up, right? So yeah. Are there clear goals and timelines established for the change initiative? Yes, I think I give you a little bit timeline on that. I think we have a full cost understanding from last year. The timeline is January 1st, 2026. I think that's where CBAM starts in full. And I would say that we have around 1.5 years to really get it ready. And also making sure that how we are managing our emission reports and how we are playing around on scope 1 and 2, which is more reliably will happen, and also scope 3. That will be an important part of the puzzle. And then some of the products which are very much affected by CBAM, it will be generally, as you know, iron and steel, aluminum, cement, fertilizers, electricity, hydrogen, and some upstream, downstream products, which are generally in the overall alloy family. So the next question is, what measurable outcomes have resulted from the change effort? I don't think that has been measured yet. We are not there yet, right? I feel that we are in the process of transformation. There are some organizations that are very mature already, large organizations, who are basically seeing some effects on this, but the full implementation will happen on January 1st, 2026. What can leaders realistically do to get their teams to align on the implementation of CBAM? Bring 4 organizations together, 4 businesses together: data, CFO, supply chain, procurement. Bring that 4, remove the silo, exactly know the framework. It can be anything. It can be Task Force Climate Disclosure, GHG, GRI, whatever it is you're following. Make sure to bring the 4 teams together. Are the opportunities for stakeholders? Go ahead.
Andy, really quick, can you double click on that in terms of bringing the 4 teams together? In some ways, we talked about earlier, making sure that teams are aligned, working cross-functionally. Do you have any tools, resources, or maybe a structure chart on how to bring those teams together?
The short answer is yes. I mean, the tools and resources are there in the market. One of the reasons maybe I got the seat to speak is because we actually do that work. But again, this is not the endorsement thing. But short answer, yes, there are tools, there are platforms who actually help you to bring the team together, remove the silo, do a ranking scoring, where the investment should go, what kind of maturity you have, let's say, in water conservation versus electricity conservation, right? Do you have the electricity bills coming in between fossil fuel and non-fossil fuel ideas? So yes, there are tools, there are frameworks to bring this thing to you. Short answer, love to speak more. Thank you for eliciting that question one more time. I'm not sure if you spoke to you if already about, can you talk about the climate tech is bridging the gap of the sustainability transformation, especially for CBAM? Very, very good question again, right? So I'm so happy that you're making this interactive. So I will talk about why climate technology is important and what is different. I'll take this question later. What is different between non-climate technology, because supply chain is many decades old, right? Nothing new. In the last 100 years, it has matured. Last 30, 40 years, enterprise resource planning has made it so good. What's new in the climate technology, right? Here is something I will say. In supply chain, you may have 30 parameters that you're collecting. Physical risk, transition risk, mature market risk, your customers' risk, all these you're collecting, right? Variety of data. Product carbon footprint risk, very many things you are going after, right? What is new is, among all this data collection, there are certain attributes of E, environment, S, social, G, governance, which we never have captured before. For example, what will be my crop production in next year or this year if I use these fertilizers, these kinds of chemicals or non-chemical, it's organic food sometimes, right? In this temperature to get the crop, get the farm to table. So this whole analysis, it's an agri technology that we need, but you need to understand, you need to take the composition of fire, earthquake, tsunami, storm, anything which is not only affecting the field, but transport from and to the field. Okay, so so that's what it is, right? So I would say that there is a lot of demand around driving the transparency of supply chain, and that transparency of supply chain is going to the next level with climate attributes, which climate attributes we never collected before. That's collection of the climate attributes is what I'm calling climate technology enablement. For example, industrial Internet of Things, real-time data collection is there. I mean, you see all the hyperscalers, industrial IoT solutions that we have, they're very mature right now. But in that industrial IoT solution, are we collecting certain parameters which is enabling you to create water, electricity, fertilizer, whatever conservation in a better way? Are you calculating those? Are you collecting those attributes, which is becoming your E part? E means environment part. I don't think that everybody is doing that. That's where your climate technology comes into play. And climate technology actually gives you that ability to sit on top of supply chain. And it's together becomes more robust. That's where the climate technology comes into play. Here is my 30 seconds on that. Sustainability is not new, it's net new. And the net new is so deep that supply chain needs that help. But once we club this together, it becomes a holistic green supply chain or sustainable supply chain, right? Without the greenwashing part. I think we have the next question is, are there opportunities for stakeholders to provide feedback and contribute to change process? Absolutely, yes. So one of the things that we are seeing in the market is the whole change management organization is becoming more and more smarter with CBAM and taking CBAM into cross-border supply chain. How can we use data analytics to track and manage effects on the supply chain when it comes to CBAM? I'll give an example. So let's say a value chain. You have a seed grower. They are growing seeds. They will take it to various parts of the farmer's industry or industry, to the stores, to wherever retail stores, right? So now to make sure, let's talk about this. A very unique scenario is happening in CBAM. Counterfeit. I'm importing or exporting, but it seems like this is the same seed that I bought 2 years back, but somehow in the cross-border counterfeit is happening. You can run data analytics around that. So avoid counterfeit. Counterfeit is a very painful topic for CBAM and in turn supply chain. How do you reach across the political spectrum to get everyone on board with the implementation of CBAM? I'm heading to Washington, D.C. I'm just joking, right? So look, it is a part of something that's a good news, bad news, right? I'm in the middle, right? So I will be political to respond to this question. I feel whatever happens on the political spectrum, it's what's the value of your organization is important, right? Is it a purpose-led or is it just a profitable-led? If it's both, bingo. If it's purpose-led, good, because you still have to run a profitable business. But how do you make sure that both come together? Did you already speak to leadership approaches of the team to achieve the implementation of CBAM? Can you give us some specific and actionable details? One of the things that we are seeing in CBAM that is really working out from a cross-border perspective is blurring the boundary, bring a couple of stakeholders from your suppliers within your team, revisit your IP, intellectual property, revisit your negotiations contract, bring a couple of suppliers in your leadership team, make them accountable from day one. Around 20 suppliers, choose 2 and do a prototype. That's where your implementation approach will become more robust, okay? So I think all the questions I've answered. Very much appreciated of all the questions and fully understand the risk areas. Team is there, align leadership, transparency, writing and reading data, financial impact. CBAM impacts 3 areas of finance, right? Of course, it's bottom line, no brainer, right? If you do a better job, your margin improves. Top line, better sales, country of origin, does CBAM. Number 3 is your, I would say, how do you manage your overall brand and access to new markets, access to new loans. There's an element of brand, access to new market, access to new loans as well. That's your financial impact is. And there are standard platform tools who are doing this analysis, right? So that's where actually I want to do. I think hopefully the questions have helped in kind of facilitating the conversation. But love to take more questions. I'm the bottom of the hour here. So Tanisha, I'd like to get back to you. If any more questions, love to take it.
Andy, thank you so much. You looks like you've answered the majority of all of the questions that were left in the Q&A, and I'm not seeing any in the chat at this moment. So this is an opportunity. If something has sparked in your mind and you want to jump ahead and ask a question, please do so. In the meantime, I will say, Andy, you've done a great deal in helping us to demystify CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and regulation. So thank you so much for your presentation and really being able to speak off the cuff, answering questions, and really kind of let us know, give us an insight into your brain on all of these pieces. So, any more questions? All right, well, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. If you're there, give Andy a high five. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And please stay in touch. I'm on LinkedIn. Love to connect all of you. And any question that I can answer on LinkedIn, just you can find me on LinkedIn. Good luck, good selling, good purpose, good life. Okay, bye-bye.
Awesome. Great tips and tools from Andy. Thank you again so much for that. So before we roll into a break, I have a few announcements that I'm going to share with you all. So if you did not know, now you will, that the IIA offers additional ESG resources for audit professionals. You can participate in the Internal Auditing for Sustainable Organizations Certificate Program and earn up to 16 CPE credits. Then we're also hosting an ESG in the role of internal audit member webinar on August the 7th. You can get the details on both the certificate program and the member webinar on our website. Now, before we get to take a quick break, we're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm sorry. Actually, we're going to take an extended break. That's actually coming up here. So this is a great opportunity for you to catch up on work a little bit. You can grab a quick bite to eat or take a walk, kind of reset your brain and get ready for the rest of the SARA conference. We're so excited. We'll see you back here at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to get started sharp. So you're all welcome. Thank you so much for being so active in the chat and really participatory in this session. We look forward to seeing your feedback in our survey. See you back here at 2:20 p.m. Eastern.